Welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis. With me, as always, is Dave. Hello, Dave.
Hello, everyone. Inky circle that means hello.
Yeah. Greetings, visitor.
Yeah.
Today, we are covering Arrival, a 2016 film starring Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner, directed by Denis Villeneuve.
Dennis Villeneuve.
The rest of his work I am unfamiliar with, but I feel this is a very underrated sci-fi film.
You feel correctly.
Yeah. And it seems like a really good way to kick off the new year, launching into the new year and into the future with science. Science! You know, I started out with one note, Dave, and all it said was, I love Forrest Whitaker.
That's a good note. I say this a lot. I feel like this is his best thing. I can get annoyed by Forrest Whitaker. I feel like they lean on this like slack-jawed Forrest Whitaker making people nervous, Forrest Whitaker.
It's funny you say that about Forrest Whitaker because one of the things I like about him and everything is how vulnerable he is. He's got a vulnerability to him. Even when he's got on a bravado, you can see the cracks and there's something humanistic about him. So I always like him.
I can agree with you, and I can say that Forrest Whitaker is right for this part because of what you just said. He is this large, in charge colonel who's basically in charge of the most important mission America has ever undertaken. Yeah. So he's a major dude. He says things like, make me understand what you're telling, make me understand. He's like, I need more than that. Make me understand. It's not lip service. He's literally saying, use more words, make me understand. Okay, go ahead.
In this movie, Amy Adams stars as a linguistics expert, a PhD named Dr. Banks, and she's brilliant at translating languages. Jeremy Renner co-stars as a theoretical physicist who believes in science above all else. And they are the team recruited by an army colonel, played by my beloved Forrest Whitaker, to communicate with aliens who have just landed at different points upon the Earth. The ones in America are in Montana, I believe. The Army has set up a perimeter, and Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner go in there to try and build a language with the aliens so that they can communicate and figure out Forrest Whitaker's big question, which is, why are you here and what do you want? They're not sure if the aliens are explorers / scientists, or if they're just tourists, or if they have some sort of darker, more sinister purpose on this planet. Jeremy Renner's character labels the aliens, because there are two of them, he calls them Abbott and Costello. But at its heart, this is a movie about communication, which I love.
Absolutely. It's a simple movie about communication in a way.
Yeah, a simple movie about a complicated communication. It's interpersonal communication between the humans. It's between
the nations,
and then the interplanetary communication
between the species.
Right. There's a lot going on
in this simple movie.
And so, like I said, I love Forrest Whitaker, even with that bizarre accent he's doing. Let's get started. His accent in this, it reminds me every once in a while, Catch Me If You Can pops up on streaming services. And my wife and I are like, oh, that was a good movie. That was fun. Maybe we should watch it. And then one of us, it always alternates, will turn to the other and go, comic books. Doing that horrible voice that Tom Hanks did in it. And we're like, you're right. I can't watch this.
Do that again.
But Forrest, I can watch him do anything. And he is the army colonel who is gruff, but you can tell that he's on the side of Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner's characters. And he just needs something to tell the group of men around the table, the generals.
He kind of breaks the mold. He breaks the mold of that character that usually shows up in sci-fi movies. The guy who you love to hate, the guy who is army regs above all, the guy who keeps failing to listen to the smart people they brought in. Right. This is a guy who absolutely listens to the smart people he brought in.
Yeah, even things like that are nice developments. And it's why this is one of those films, like Wonder Boys, that I think is underknown. And it's a shame because it's a smart film that deserves a larger audience. I know you're a big sci-fi fan. What did you think about the What did you think about the appearance of the UFOs, aka the shells, as they call them, and the aliens themselves, the heptapods?
Less is more, and I was happy because they
Hmm.
understand less is more. There's no pew pew. You want the aliens to be an oh my God, wow, aliens situation, but you don't want their appearance to be the overwhelming thing. This movie isn't about the appearance. It
Yeah,
isn't about the look of the aliens. It's
right.
about the speech of the aliens and stuff.
I th-
But a beautiful rendition of aliens.
mhm.
The ships are sleek and
I love the
awesome, and
ships.
like a Millennium Falcon style, studded with a million little pieces of equipment ship
Hmm.
would be terrible. These guys are so far advanced. Their ship looks like a lens.
It's so much more believable to me, these ships, because we would not understand their propulsion anyway. So the fact that sometimes they try to build these ships and like, yeah, and then this nuclear device comes from here, and then you have this, there's some odd
Yeah,
displacement that happens, there's some sort of bending of the atmosphere. We don't know what happens. It's just almost looks like a smooth stone that you might skip along the water.
that's what
And
it
that
looks
makes
like, which
sense
is that makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's
aerodynamically and otherwise.
yeah, the ships are
Um,
fantastic, and they use them both vertically and horizontally at the
Oh,
end,
I
which is
love
terrific.
that. I
It's a
love
great
that.
move. Yeah.
And the aliens themselves, for those of you who haven't seen this, are called heptapods from the Greek, meaning seven, and pod meaning foot. So they have 7 feet. And we see them through a smoky atmosphere, and they look pretty much like big hands, with their wrist almost like the head, and their long, stringy finger-looking tentacles for legs. They communicate with whines that sort of sound like the noises made by whales, and their written language is written with dark smoke that they emit from their tentacles that seems almost like squid ink.
Yeah, it's very similar to Squid Ink. Yeah.
Yeah, which I love in the promo that you did for this
Oh yeah,
episode.
yeah. I slipped it in there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
But how
Um,
cool is that? It looks like Thing from the Addams
That's what I
Family.
was going to say. I was going to say if you're a listener who is going to go ahead and listen to this without watching the movie, the best description I could think of would be that these things look like Thing. I almost want to make a small criticism of the aliens being similar to anything, like being similar to squid.
Octopus or
Yes, octopus or squid. That's only because I like to think like, oh, come up with something completely alien. So like there's no shared genetics.
right.
It's it would be so different. It wouldn't be similar to anything that we're already familiar with. It could be that the person between the story and the writing of the film that they decided there is maybe some shared genetic material or
Hmm.
who knows what. It's kind of okay.
Yeah.
It certainly would be utter nitpicking if I were to say like, oh, I dislike that it's like Squid Ink.
Well, you know what?
Um,
In a lesser movie, they couldn't get away with it. This is a smart movie, and you were like,
yeah, yeah,
okay, the aliens have to look like something.
right,
Moving
right.
on.
And you know how badly it can go when you try to make an alien that is completely disconnected
Hmm.
from what we're familiar with. That's how you get the blob with the flashing lights on Star Trek.
The army/alien thing is something we've seen a million times before, since ET, Close Encounters, Aliens, etc. And this one felt more on point than any other. And I think it's a direct result of me seeing it again, living in a post-pandemic world. The germaphobe procedural that they have set up, and the kind of hazmat suit things in place, and the way that they were inoculated, and the science of it felt very real. The kind of the bureaucratic
Mhm.
stuff felt more real this time around.
I was feeling very similar when they were flying in on the helicopter and they were coming in over the site. All of this pack and ship style bivouac, these structures that they'll be putting their communications offices in, and the structures they'll be putting the science rooms in,
Right.
and those ET pathways, those ET like
Tent tunnels.
cellophane tunnels. Yeah,
Yeah.
super well done. It's also it feels very best case scenario. It feels like the government is really on it. They didn't just start launching stuff at it. They put a very smart man in charge. They apparently have mostly smart underlings. There's only one CIA agent in
I was
there
just going to say
mopping up
that's
the
the one
bits.
salt in the wound. You know, if there's anything authentic about the way humans are portrayed in this film, it's how stupid they are once you put them in large groups. Like they cut to riots and looting on the TV a few times, and it sadly rings all too true. Fear and stupidity are rampant anytime you have large groups. And then you keep cutting back to this little think tank, this group of just individuals who are like communicating, with other individuals in Pakistan, in England, in all these different places.
Australia, yeah.
Sharing information. Meanwhile, out there's just people. I don't know what looting and rioting are going to do for you when the aliens are here. Sadly, large groups of people turn into idiots.
There's all these movies about aliens who come and invade Earth to destroy Earth. Some of them have weapons. Some of them have biological warfare. Some of them start sucking up the water. It depends on what movie. In this movie, 12 ships come, land, and fold their arms.
Yeah.
And literally within weeks, the Earth is on the verge of destruction at its own hand.
It reminds me a little bit of that great Twilight Zone episode, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, where aliens come down and all they do is start turning on and off lights in different houses on that street. All of a sudden, the people are like, why does he have power and I don't have power? And they're rioting and running, and that guy's got it. It's like a Salem witch hunt kind of thing. And I think that's very real.
Oh, absolutely. It reminds me of Wonder Boys in a way. Wonder Boys is a movie about a brilliant author. So how does a filmmaker make a film about a brilliant author if he's not a brilliant author? Take that and magnify it. How does a human being make a film about beings who have solved the problem of the arrow of time? It's a very weird thing to do, to make a movie about a mindset that human beings haven't achieved. Brings up an interesting point in that film might be the best way to approach it, to disassemble this arrow of time. I'm going to mention it.
We don't want to spoil anything, though, for people who haven't seen the movie.
I don't think we can talk about it without spoiling that plot point.
So for anyone who hasn't seen the film, if you're intrigued already, go watch the film, come back. I know it's playing for free on YouTube because that's how I saw it. Free with ads.
I watched it for free on one of the services.
Yeah. So go watch it and then come back and hear the rest of it, because here comes some spoilers.
Well, let me start by just going non sequitur. I forget what year it was, probably around the year that I See Dead People movie came out. What was it called? Sixth Sense?
Sixth Sense, yeah.
I was working at Drinkland, and I had a tendency to use one of the two bathrooms because it was usually cleaner. And written on the wall in ballpoint pen was, Bruce Willis is a ghost. And this is at a time when I'm a bartender 6 nights a week. I'm going out with my friends 5 nights a week. Movies and television and everything else do not even exist to me. I don't even know that there's a movie with Bruce Willis. I don't even know any of this. So I just keep seeing Bruce Willis as a ghost. And I keep thinking, oh, what is that? Like some kind of like Andre the Giant has a posse or something like that, whatever. And then I get sick. So I rent a movie, and I rent The Sixth Sense. And I'm watching it, and I'm just a little bit into it. And I go, oh my God.
Ruined.
That's incredible. I was so psyched though, because I was like, that guy, was that his intent? Because he got me. I was like, he totally got me.
Yeah, at the same time, that guy was a dick.
Oh, God, totally.
Like you go in a bathroom and do that.
And ruin a movie for thousands of people who use that bathroom? Terrible. So with this in mind, I mean, let's talk about the movie for a moment. Call this the Arrow of Time section of the chat. There's a lot of stuff that points to it early on. You'll notice that Louise Banks, Amy Adams, is that her name?
Mm-hmm.
Louise Banks has like disassociation when the movie starts. She's sort of going through the motions. She lays in bed with her bed pillow.
Drinks a lot of wine.
Drinks wine, goes to work, sort of staring off into space, comes home. Like she's...
Depression.
It's almost... Yeah, but it's... And you're wrongly associating it to the death of her daughter, which... It's really hard to talk about.
Dave's going plot again.
Yeah, which isn't something that's actually happened yet. My point being, I'll simplify it. Louise Banks seems unaffected by major things that are happening around her. And perhaps it's partly because, in a sense, in a way, she already knows they're going to happen. She already knows, she already lives outside of time. It's hard, yeah.
Here's my problem. How does she know anything yet? An argument could be made that she's just a depressed person, caught up with her own personal grief and these kind of dreams she doesn't understand.
But what is the grief over?
What is anyone with depression's grief over?
Pick a human being.
Existential angst, ennui, the life of the mind.
Why are we here? Or why are you here?
Yeah. And she's devoted her entire life to other languages than her own and communicating. And it's ironic to have a character who is such an individual, such a almost despondent individual who lives in seclusion out at a lake in a cabin by herself, being this person who's made communication their life. It's a really interesting wrinkle. When she's at school and trying to teach and people are rushing around, she's still all by herself all the time. One of the things I think about a great movie is that you can bring a couple of interpretations to it, much like a great song. And your version of that song in your head is different from someone else's. And so I could see people watching this movie and just being like, the aliens came down and gave this woman a life. You know, she kind of tapped into something that she wasn't privileged to before, because how do you start with her with knowledge of anything?
This points well to your point that it takes a huge universe occurrence and shows it to you through just a couple of people and their emotions. This is the story of when aliens came to Earth and their effect on Louise Banks.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, because almost every movie thinks that the exciting story is the effect on the planet. This story says, yeah, but the planet is so hard to think about. Let's just think about Louise.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite. It's the antithesis of things like Independence Day.
Yeah, Independence Day comes to mind. It is the antithesis of Independence Day.
Yeah.
It very much is, in several ways. That would be a reasonable way to discuss this whole movie, how it differs from Independence Day.
There are so many great things about this movie, but the thing I keep coming back to is communication. Her and Jeremy Renner, Ian Donnelly, his character, immediately form this wonderful partnership. So it's them versus everyone else. And it's also kind of them and Forrest Whitaker versus everyone else. It's Forrest Whitaker versus the men in the room that he has to answer to. It's all of them versus the CIA agent who always has the most negative take on everything. It's their nation versus every other nation. So there's all this antagonism. And amidst it all are these different species and these different humans trying to communicate with each other and trying to negotiate all of those things. It's an amazing take on something we've seen a million times before. And no one else ever did it quite this way before.
It's done very thoroughly. Because to do communication, you need at least two people. There's an incredible scene. There's a flat screen TV for every nation of the 12 nations. We're watching those screens turn off as each nation leaves the conversation and stops communicating. You're watching the failure of communication. Within Ian Banks, Louise, and Colonel Weber, those three plus Abbott and Costello, the names of the two aliens, you're watching the success of communication. Outside of the small group, which is what you said, small group, yes, big group, no. Outside of the small group, everything's falling apart. Everything's going really well for the five.
Right. But nothing ever moves quick enough for humans at large. You know, it's like every time you see something about a scientist and they break through with a new thing that possibly could help cure cancer or something, it's immediately like, well, where is it? Get it on the street. Let's see what it, and it's like, well, it's kind of theoretical now, but we're working to it. Get out of here. Like nothing is ever quick enough. And Dave's alluding to a scene where, you know, the nations stop talking with each other because of fear and because of like competition, distrust, mutual distrust. And as you know, that's how wars happen. When communication breaks down, the worst parts of human nature emerge. Speaking to communication, there are some wonderful scenes where Amy Adams tries to explain things to Forrest Whitaker and tell him why she's taking the tack she is with teaching communication. And she tells this wonderful anecdote about a kangaroo. She's like, these explorers or colonialists or whatever came to Australia, asked the Aborigines, what are these animals that are hopping around? They said kangaroo. And so they started calling them kangaroo. But in the Aboriginal language, kangaroo means I don't understand. And she said that. And then he was like, all right, I can sell that. And he walks off. And the guy was like, that's a great story. And she's like, yeah, it's not true, but it made my point. How genius to write when we see also, I'm gonna get on the woke train for a minute. Saddle up, Dave.
Yeah.
When
Woo, woo,
when
woo.
we
We
are
really need a thing. I
when we
gotta get like a
we
little
needed
light.
one this episode. When we when we see the kind of way that women are drawn in most films, and especially sci-fi films. Well, no, let me take that back. When we see the way women are drawn and the kind of stupid things that male writers make come out of their mouths a lot of the time, what a genius character, and what a treat it must have been for Amy Adams to be able to play a character that essentially is the hope of humanity and who comes through and is a real hero and who succeeds where men cannot and will not. She's just brilliant in this. It's a great performance, but also on the page, it's a great character. And I really, really love it.
She's very capable, but she's not Ripley.
Right.
She's not a badass.
Well, that's what I was going to say very quickly just about sci-fi. Sci-fi is sort of the refuge of strong female characters because you get
that's
Ripley
why you
and
stopped
Alien.
yourself.
I stopped myself short of saying it, but
I knew that was why.
Yeah.
You're still right in a way because Ripley can only be like, it's great that Ripley is what she is. And it's great that a woman and a cat survived this situation. It makes me very happy every time. But in a way, it still can be picked on because it has to be this badass woman. It can't just be a woman, which is why I love that when they're entering the ship, Louise Banks is afraid. She is helped by two men. One throws her up, another two catch her. They're totally fine with portraying her as like maybe not as strong as the rest of these guys in a physical sense, but she's an even more real woman hero than Ripley.
Also, remember, Ripley fails her way to being the one who has to do battle with the alien at the end. She has no real power. She's not listened to by any of the men. She's, all of the things that assail women in the real world as well. But she has to become a badass, and it's a slow progression. Amy Adams, out of the gate, forces herself on that helicopter through a clever play on words, sends Forrest Whitaker to the only other competition language-wise, which is a guy at Berkeley.
Is a dumb schmuck in her eyes.
Yeah, and she thinks if we're going to fail as humanity, I don't want it to be on that guy's shoulders. She's just smart out of the gate, and I love that about her. There's a backstory that Dave alluded to of Amy's character has lost a daughter, and there are recurring remembrances of her along the way that kind of help the plot along.
I could just see talking about time for an hour.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
It's a big part of this movie. There's some nice twists and reveals along the way and at the end. And it's a very rewarding sci-fi film. It finds a way to make things personal, whereas most sci-fi films, you get the, oh, wow, look at that stuff, right? But after you watch the film, like nothing about it sticks with you. And this one kind of sticks with you. There's also a major plot point about this film's fictional leader of China, who is General Shang.
Big Domino.
Big Domino. When he falls, a lot of other dominoes fall. It's just a reminder, even the broadly drawn characters here serve their purpose and ring true. You can tell some people are archetypes. You can tell some people are composites, but they feel very real within the movie. It's so well grounded. The sound design is great too. It's like, tone poems, as Ross Geller on Friends would call them. It's almost this kind of like the stuff Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross did for all the Fincher films. Johan Johansson wrote the score.
Sounds like someone the Beastie Boys made up.
Yeah, it's so true. It's Mike D's alter ego, now that MCA has passed with Horatio Hornblower.
So,
With very few notes, there's some malevolent feelings that are stirred up and futuristic feelings. It feels like the game has changed, even the clouds look different.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
It's a very different world, and it captures that well. Even when, it's a sunny day, it doesn't look that sunny. They capture the shade of the shells.
I like the lack of notes in the music. The same way I like the lack of definition in the ships. The same way I like the fact that the aliens exist mostly in fog.
Also, that there's an absence of space in their language in the center, the circle. I think it's one of the themes, it's what we don't know. It's what is not said. It's what we can't see. It's what we don't understand. That absence is very present in the film. And it's the way that Jeremy Renner ends up cracking the language a bit.
Yeah, I thought it was nice that they gave the crack to Jeremy Renner. It solidified her and him as a team.
It spoke to the bond that formed.
Yeah.
And his respect for her, which when they're riding the helicopter, he's like quoting from her book. He's kind of messing with her a little bit.
Yeah, he's like got another language jockey.
Yeah,
these guys
he's
always
like
show up.
The foundation of things isn't language, it's science. And then later, you see the growing respect and how he said, you keep moving
Saving
us away
us
from these
traps.
language traps. It's great.
Yeah.
I love that.
It is great.
In most movies, sci-fi or otherwise, they want us to buy a couple and to buy the bond between them just because it says so on the page. Here they show us.
Yeah. Also, 99 out of 100 times, that bond is simply aliens are coming. Follow me.
Yeah.
I'll lift this thing and get you out from under it. Now we're in love. Like,
yeah. Who's the jackass? Who's the jackass in Guardians of the Galaxy?
Chris Pratt.
Chris Pratt. It's like the Chris Pratt kind of shit that goes on now. Capable women.
Yeah, this is just I'll pay the rent bullshit. You must pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. You must pay the rent. I'll pay the rent. This is the exact opposite of that. Again, it's the anti-Independence Day. It's so nice. And you know what?
Independence Day is fun.
Yeah. No, don't get me. But hey, I waited online to see Independence Day opening day, and I absolutely, I left happy as a clam.
It's required viewing every July 4th.
So a lot of times I'm watching a sci-fi movie and they're dipping into this love relationship, and I'm like, I don't really care about this. This intertwines it and makes it important. You know what? It tops my favorite couple in a sci-fi movie ever. It will replace the moment in The Road Warrior where the one woman from the compound with the long hair and the like white outfit gets caught up on the barbed wire of the oil tanker and glances at Mel Gibson. That to me is the greatest love scene in a sci-fi movie ever. And it was a little much.
Wow.
Like that's how little I want to see a relationship in these movies.
That's how few relationships actually are allowed to exist in those types of movies. The fact that you saw that as a love scene that went on a little bit too long. It was a little too clingy.
This glance is a bit clingy. Yeah, no, I'm half joking, but this doesn't come from my dislike of interpersonal relationships. It comes from my dislike of the portrayal in most of these movies.
Yeah, and I just want to make clear what I'm saying about Independence Day is only the role of women in that movie. There's a lot more that women can do in these movies than wring their hands and say, oh my God, come back safe. It happens in everything from Armageddon on down, where a woman's job is to cry, to sweat over whether their man will come back, and to mourn them if they don't.
Arrival actually puts a woman like that in the film on the phone with Captain Mark O'Brien. And you can just hear his wife on the other side of the headphones going, well, what is going on? Are you going to, little Johnny's afraid you're going to die.
I hate that guy. I hate his wife.
But you're supposed to, right? I mean,
yeah.
Is he
I don't buy it either.
Is he the guy who starts the insurgency?
Yeah. Just so you know, there's a saboteur who is driven by fear more than anything else. And these things happen. He's
driven by fear and a love of Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the movie is pointing out.
Yeah.
The movie does a couple of those. It points out that these guys who do radio shows and sell rifles and rations. Louise Banks, her mother calls her about the aliens landing. Her mother says something about something she saw on the news. And Louise Banks says, I told you not to watch that channel. Those people are idiots. This movie takes a stand on that.
Yeah, it's well
pretty
done.
Clearly. Yeah. Tell me, you were going to talk about Captain Marks. You don't like him and his conversation with his wife, and you don't buy it.
I honestly don't feel the film needed that side story, especially given the fallout from it. It was almost like, all right, that happened. Now let's move on. So I simply don't feel like it needed it. Also, I didn't quite buy it. It didn't ring true to me, because this is a guy who reached the rank he did by blindly following orders. So I don't think tearful calls from his wife or the
would
occasional
push him
chat
over
with
the
his
edge.
buddies would push him over the edge. So, I feel that was a kind of misstep in an otherwise brilliant, well pulled off film. So that was my problem with it.
As I was bringing it up, I was thinking to myself, I'm not sure why it's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see why the sabotage is there. That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
It's necessary. It moves things along.
But it could have been foiled.
You could say that one of the aliens accepts his fate, because if he has this grasp of time, he knows that he's at risk. When they arrive to that particular meeting with the sabotage, Ian says, maybe Abbott's not going to join us today. And then he shows up. And in the second viewing, that made me think that maybe Abbott was nervous about what was going to happen that day. Anyway, I might be getting too deep into the plot.
Yeah,
there.
especially for a plot point we weren't crazy about.
Yeah.
We better wrap up. In closing, was there anything else you wanted to say to recommend this movie, which we both give 2 thumbs way up for?
This movie is hard science fiction. It's hard for me to describe.
Realistic.
It is realistic. This is a sci-fi movie. This is right up my alley, is kind of what I'm saying. I often say this thing where it bothers me. I feel like people could go to a movie producer and say, I have an idea for a movie. These aliens come down from space, and the producer says, what happens? And the person says, I just told you, aliens come down from space. I mean, what more do you want? They wind up adding so much to it to make it exciting. Could the computer become possessed? Maybe one of the crew starts killing everyone.
Yeah.
This is sci-fi sticking to its guns, being thought-provoking, dealing with actual theoretical physics and time, while completely intertwining perfectly interpersonal relationships and geopolitical relationships. The fact that it does that is incredible.
Yeah. For a genre that has most of the time given us candy and junk food, this is a 7-course gourmet meal. This ain't Twinkies. This is a steak dinner. This is
what would you compare it to? Sci-fi. Like, what do you think would measure up in a similar way? It's almost hard. It's that good that it's hard to think of something.
I have to go to 2001, Space Odyssey. I would have to.
Given the choice, I'd watch this.
Oh, me too, by far. I only mean as far as the realism of it. This is real in a way Star Wars isn't real. And I love Star Wars. I think Alien is as brilliant as this is. But
I agree.
But Alien somehow remains a popcorn movie, whereas this one doesn't have the kind of, 5 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. There's no flashing lights. There's no ticking clock. There's no jump scares. I don't know why this popped in my head, but Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, where the earwig gets in his head.
Yeah, they put the bug in Chekhov's ear.
Even that is brutal. This is a battle of the mind. It's a real cerebral film. You know what? If I had to align this film with something, I have to go back to the 50s, to the day the earth stood still.
There you go. That's a great example. Because think about this movie. This woman is teaching language. Right away, aliens land. Right away, she gets whisked away. Right away, they go into the ship. Right away, they start talking. Right away, there's an explosion. Right away. This stuff all happens, and you're completely relaxed while you're watching it. You're not on the edge of your seat. You're leaning back and thinking the whole time. The music helps keep you calm. The soundscape helps keep you calm and just reminds you, keep thinking, keep following.
And like the day the earth stood still, the terror comes from not knowing and anticipating and worrying and anxiousness. And what is not shown and what is not known is the greatest fear. Yeah. And what is averted at the end.
They're both also hinging on what mistakes will man make.
And man is the great unknown in this. The aliens are painted as these mysterious beings, and we don't know what they want, and it's terrifying. When really, when you look at it from the aliens' point of view, man is the great unknown. His motivations seem arbitrary and really mysterious. And the aliens have a language that tells you everything all at once. And so it must be maddening on the other side of the glass, where they're trying to figure out what these primitive beings who are so intent on killing each other and us want, And the aliens want our help and to help us in the process. It's a really wonderful movie about communication in its purest form, communication for communication's sake, and the connection that unites us all.
Yeah. So heading into the new year, why don't we all listen more and talk less? Said the podcaster. But I forget, there's a philosopher who said 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen twice as much as you speak. I'm trying to start a thing where we have lessons in our show.
To learn more about the people and places in this week's episode, consult your local library. Yeah, and that's great. One to grow on.
Oh, yeah, that's one to grow on. The more you know. We'll get Hollis an animated star rainbow. But seriously, see this movie and think about how important communication is, and hope that the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and Marines are full of Forrest Whitakers, because that guy is awesome.
Yeah.
The most reasonable ever colonel.
Great. So yeah, we love this movie. Please check it out. Great job, Dave.
Thank you, Hollis. Great job over there.
I will see you in the future. Happy New Year.
Wow, neat. You will see me in the future.
Happy New Year, Dave. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year, everyone. Bye.
Hollis and Dave would like to thank you for enjoying Pop Culture Graveyard.